Well, good morning, everybody. Last week, somebody passed on a comment to me for Sandra, saying how well she had read and brought clarity to a difficult passage from Paul's letter to the Romans that we're going through. The trouble with Paul's letter to the Romans is that it's very dense and we're doing it in chunks, and in Paul's mind there's just one big piece from chapter 5 to chapter 8 that he's got in his mind, and so breaking it up and trying to unpack it is maybe not the way to go. And so today, rather than try and explain the detail, I'm going to try and deal with the issue that is underlying all that's going on. For many decades, I used to watch a film programme on BBC, and it had a very distinctive theme tune. Ding, 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 ding. That was a musical version of a song. It was put together by the Billy Taylor Trio, if you're interested. But the song with lyrics was done by Nina Simone. And the title of that song is "I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free." I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. And the lyrics expressed that. Well, that's what Paul is writing about here. He's trying to explain to people how to be free. Freedom is a very central human concept. To be free. Think about the history as we've seen it shown to us in movies. Spartacus, the slave uprising in history, to be free. William Wallace in Mel Gibson's Braveheart, remember the great speech as he rides by his army, "And they will never take away our freedom." You remember Martin Luther King standing at the Lincoln Memorial, "Free at last, free at last, free at last." Freedom has been the hallmark of what human beings try to be in life. And this whole lockdown period that we've been in has been an example of how freedoms have been curtailed in order that freedoms can be exercised. Freedom, children for example, it breaks our hearts whenever we see that children take on responsibilities that should only be done by adults, because we believe that children should be free from responsibilities, to be able to enjoy carefree days. The opposite is governments. When they decide not to take responsibility for things, when they decide to exercise a freedom that excuses them, as we're seeing now basically in America through Donald Trump, when we don't approve of that, we expect them not to try and be free from responsibility. We expect them to take that on board. And then look what happens when we give people freedom to go back out into the world, and suddenly that freedom is being abused as multitudes gather on beaches in the south of England, and all the responsibility about looking out for one another has gone right out the window. Why? Because people ultimately think that freedom is expressed best when it means I can do what I like and I don't have to consider what anybody else thinks about it. And I don't have to think about anybody else to be able to do what I want. Ultimately, many people think that's their freedom. Many people who feel trapped in lives and work situations where their freedoms to do what they want have been curtailed and denied to them. So freedom is this huge, huge concept, and we're all seeking to have it, to use it, and find that we can do so only by abusing it or being limited in what we can do in it. And this is what Paul speaks about when he talks about being enslaved to sin. Sin is not just moral wrongdoing, it's just that inability to actually be the people we want to be free. And Paul has been trying to say in this letter, there is a freedom that has been given to us as a gift. And it's the only kind of freedom that we do not have the capacity in ourselves to achieve. And the freedom that we cannot achieve by ourselves is the only freedom that makes us truly free. That's why Jesus in John's Gospel says, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Jesus came to demonstrate the truth, to reveal the truth to us that would enable us to be free. And this is the gospel that Paul is now trying to pull through this long argument to explain how to be free. And the freedom that we cannot get by ourselves, the freedom that only comes as a gift to us, is the freedom to be able to do the will of God in the world. This is something that human beings cannot ever achieve on their own, and yet if they are able to do it, they will find in their lives the freedom that they have longed for. The true freedom, says Paul, and this is the basis of this part of his letter, the true freedom comes by being a slave, in a sense, to God. Allowing your lives not to be seen as a license to do what I want, but a ability to do the thing that God wills us to do. Because in doing that, and that alone, we truly find our freedom, a capacity to live at a level that we appreciate as pure and utter gift. And that's why Paul says at the end of that reading that you earn the wages of the sinful life, and it leads to destruction basically. But the free gift that God gives to us, the ability to be free in Him, leads to eternal life, to a level of living that is pure and utter gift that we could never achieve on our own. In the story of Gulliver's travels, he has arrived amongst the little people, and they have captured him and imprisoned him in chains because they're afraid of him, because he's enormous in comparison to them, and he could easily stand on one of them and he can break their buildings down. And so they've kind of put him in chains, and Gulliver, while he's in chains, thinks about this and says, what I'll do is I'll be as gentle as I can be, because if I'm as gentle as I can be, if I show to them this side, then perhaps they'll reward me with my freedom. And so he tries to do this, and eventually the various leaders of the society come to the conclusion that we can let Gulliver go. He's not going to harm us. He's proved that he's going to be kind and good to us. But one of them holds out, oh, no, we can't let him just loose. No. And so let me think about this and then I'll come back. And so he comes back and says he can be free, but only if he obeys a number of conditions. And so he comes out to Gulliver, and he says, we're going to grant you your freedom. And Gulliver's really pleased because he thinks, oh, this is my reward for all the way I've lived here amongst them. But then the man says, and here's the conditions. And there's a whole big list of things that he's to do and not to do in order that he can say, you'll be free. And so eventually Gulliver agrees to all of this because he thinks, well, all I want to be is free. I'll do whatever you say. And so he's released. That kind of bargaining, that kind of, if I do this, maybe I'll get that. If I am prepared to do all of this, is often the way that people come to this freedom that God is offering to them. Instead of accepting it as the free gift that it is turned into a kind of conditional thing. In our minds, we think, if I do this, God will do that for me. If I am prepared to accept all these limitations on my life that I believe God is saying I should do, then God will give me something. All of that kind of conditioning around the gift of freedom has to be taken out of our minds. It's, as Paul says, it is pure gift. This is why the letter's written in the form it's written. It's written with a man, an imaginary man, who is picking up what Paul's saying and turning it in ways. You see, he says, well, if it's all that easy, then surely we can do what we like, because, you're telling us that God is just happy to keep forgiving folk of their sins, and therefore, if it's all of grace, then surely then there's nothing can come back to us. And Paul's trying to correct that, because there he says that's the idea that freedom is do what you like, but it's not what it is. But it's not also about this bargaining with God situation either. And it's not about feeling you've got to do X, Y, and Z, otherwise God won't do A, B, and C. You have to go into the flow of what God is willing you to do in your life. You have to be open to all of that without any strings being attached in your belief, and also believing that God has strings attached. There are none. That kind of freedom of entering into what God wills for us is so almost impossible for us to believe that many of us miss the opportunity of experiencing it to the full. The reward is not so much what we are given. The reward is what, when we live this life of freedom, others receive from us. This is what Jesus promises in the gospel to his disciples. Go out there and live the life of the kingdom of God among these people. And if they accept what you're saying, then they're accepting me. If they receive you, they're receiving me. And if they hear your words as the words of God, they'll get a reward that is appropriate to that. Even if they give you just a cup of cold water, they will not miss out on what God will give them. Here's the wonderful thing. We go into the world as God's children, living in that freedom of exercising only what God desires of us through his will. And then people see that and they want that. And in that wanting, they get the reward. For God touches their hearts. God touches their lives. I hope that as we go into the summer, that we will continue to go into the world as we're invited to do. We'll start to meet up and mix again. And as we do that, wouldn't it be great to do it as a people who have discovered for themselves, I know how it feels to be free. Because if you're living that and sharing that in your existence with others, it will touch them deeply, and God will give them a reward. The reward of knowing him, of knowing his son, of knowing the absence they feel in their own lives and what they desire, God will reward. And that's our gift. That's our calling. That's our life. Next week, I'll be doing these things in a different way because it's the summer Sabbath. But I hope that the summer is good to you and to all of us.